Hi there and welcome to my video. Today I'm going to show you 3 ways for beginners to make better gel prints. If you are just getting started with gel printing, these are some great foundations to start with. And if you are an experienced gel printer, these are some tips that may help you make better prints. So the first thing you want to think about is, what are you using your jelly prints for? If you know your intention about how you're going to use the papers, you'll be happier with the results because you want to know what you're actually going to do with them. You don't want to make just a bunch of paper that's going to sit around and not be used. So the first way you could use it is maybe as a collage paper. I often use my prints on my daily artworks on my index cards. So these are all jelly prints that I've made. I know that when I'm making them, I'm using them to do this and in my main artwork. So you want to think about what weight or thickness of paper do you want to use to make your prints? Because if you're using very thick paper, that wouldn't go well on something like an index card. Or if you wanted to make like a little board book, these are thin papers. So you want to keep that in mind when you're making your actual prints. You also want to think about, what size do you want to use? Do you want to make smaller prints so that you can store them easier? Or do you want to make larger prints so that they can go on bigger pieces of artwork? So these are all things that are helpful when you're starting the process and you're getting prepared to actually print. You also want to think about, are you going to make full prints? Are you going to make prints that you're actually going to frame and enjoy or give as gifts or try to sell them? Or are you going to use them to make collage work? You want to think about the different papers that you're going to use, kind of like I mentioned before, the weight of the paper. I'm just going to show you some of the papers that I use that may be helpful. First, the one that I use the most is deli paper because I really like layering. So this is the deli paper that I use. It's just Logan wrap. There is a link to it in my Amazon store. It's not real expensive and it's really very versatile. So just to give you an example how it shows up, this is a deli paper print right here. This is a deli paper print, the blue with the pink dots. This is a deli paper print. It almost looks like a marker, but it's actually a print. And here's another one. So really versatile. I love using deli paper, and it's really helpful to have a bunch of it sitting around so I have a lot to choose from. I also use collage papers, just like collage papers that I print on. So these are an example. This one I just did recently. It kind of gives an interesting background. And then I also use very basic copy paper. Most copy paper is acid free, so it's an easy size and weight to use. And then the last thing I use is old scrapbook paper. This is a little heavier, so I don't print a ton on this, but I do like having some of it on hand. So after you figure out what paper works for you and what your purpose is, it's time to get to printing. So you want to decide what size prints you're going to make. I have a 8x10 and a 5x7 plate. I often use both at the same time. I'll use the 8x10 to make prints, and sometimes I'll use the 5x7 as a helper plate, or I just use the 5x7 because I sometimes want to do a quick session. So the next tip to make better prints is all in your paint application. So here we have all of our tools to make a gel print. You have your brayer, your plate, collage paper I'm going to use to print on, and then this is my runoff sheet. So I'm actually going to use this to put some paint on first, and the next tip is all in the paint application. So when you're putting down your layer on your plate, you don't want to get too heavy. I always go for a thin layer first because that is the layer you're going to see on the top of your print. So I usually use stencils, and I don't want it to be a real thick layer. So this is what a thin layer to me is. And if you put the stencil on top, and then I use a deli paper just to pull the paint off to create a little bit of a framework to put other colors down. You could see how thin that showed up, and it's a nice piece of collage paper. The reason why you don't want to get too gloppy is because then when you make prints, it can kind of show up without any detail if you want to use multiple colors. So for example, this one. I like the color, but there's not really much going on with the print. So then for the next layer, we're just going to put down another color. So the second tip for better printing is to apply your paint in a light fashion. Some people like to be heavy-handed with their paint, and that is a preference. I personally like a lighter layer because then I can layer other colors on top of it and it'll show through. So I'm going to show you. I do a little roll over here first so I can do a light application over here. So you can see that that's just really light. And again, this is just preference for me, but I like how my prints show up this way. So then here is the moment for the third tip. The most important thing about jelly printing is to be patient. It is so hard to wait, but you want to make sure that you are really giving time for the paint to stick to the paper. So you don't want to take off the paper too soon because then you will not pull all the paint from the plate. My suggestion is to get busy doing something else while this kind of sticks to the plate. I usually wait about 2 or 3 minutes. And that's true with the layers in between each color as well. I usually give it at least a minute to dry and then put the layer on top. So while we're waiting for this to dry, I just want to show you a few examples of prints that I made that didn't come out the way that I had hoped they would. And it was because I didn't give them a chance to dry in between layers. So I already showed you this one. This is kind of muddy. Here's another kind of muddy one. This one kind of has a little detail, but for the most part, I didn't layer it correctly. This one was a pretty idea, but it just didn't work as far as the execution goes. And this one, I love the colors, but it just kind of got muddy with the pink because I layered it too heavily. It overshadowed all the stamping that I did in between. And then this was another muddy one. So that's why it's important to wait and give your prints a chance to dry in between the application. So then you can have prints like this, where you can clearly see the stencils and the colors. This one you can see the detail. Here's some more stencils. And this one I really like with the kind of oceanic vibe. So it's just to give you an idea as to how the stencils could come out when you're a little more patient and you give them a chance to dry in between the layers. So let's take a peek, see how the print came out. So we can clearly see the stencil. We could even see part of the collage paper behind it, which I love. And you can see the two different colors. You can kind of see where they blended as well. So the idea is you want to think about working backwards. When you're making a print, what do you want as the top layer? Because that's going to be the first layer that you put down. And then you can kind of work backwards from there. What colors do you want to use? What is your intention for using the paper? Are you going to just keep it as is, or are you going to use it as a collage? You want to make sure that you're being patient in between each of the layers so that they can come out clearly and it's a print that you can actually use. So I hope this was helpful for you today. This is a real fun video to make. If you're interested in more jelly printing sessions, I'll put 2 more right here for you. And I appreciate you being with me here today. I hope to see you again soon.